What happens at laser tag never stays at laser tag.
Laser Unfocused Tag Talk.
Laser Unfocused Tag Talk.
I feel like you could be like in Ghostbusters or something.
Oh my God, you have got some stories.
Let's talk about laser tag.
Who knew you were a laser tag legend?
Time to get laser unfocused. Tag Talk with Tivia.
The laser tag industry began with the grand opening of Photon in Dallas, Texas on March 28, 1984. The game was created by George Carter III along with technical engineer James Dooley, building what would be the first commercial arena laser tag system. As we prepare to celebrate 40 years of a thriving laser tag industry going strong, this is a great time to talk with a few players who were there playing right from the early days of Photon Dallas back in 1984. I'm being joined by Andrew Laska, Clark, and Jason Bock to talk about their memories from their time playing at the very first Photon in Dallas, Texas. Welcome, Photon Warriors.
Thank you.
Hey there.
Hi. So glad to have you all joining me because we are coming up on the 40th anniversary of Photon. It launched in 1984, and all three of you were there that year playing the game that turned into what became the whole laser tag industry that we've enjoyed ever since. So I'd like to dial back the time machine and go in your memories to 1984 and talk to me a little bit about the first Photon in Dallas. What did you think? What did you feel? What do you remember? Just share a little bit about what was that first experience like?
Sure, I'll jump on. So I was a young lad in high school. I was at the Dalcon gaming convention in downtown Dallas, and they rented a bus, and it was one of the events you could sign up for, and you could go out and play a game of Photon. It's probably about 15, 20-minute drive and then come back. And so I added that on as an event at the game convention. I didn't find anything out about Photon until I read in the little catalog of all the different events that you could have, and it sounded really cool. So I had not seen any of the media. I hadn't seen any advertising or anything else about Photon until I read it in the GameCon program, and then went out there and did it. At the time, it's hard in our techno-savvy, overwhelming technology world. It's really hard to state how different and cool it was compared to anything else. I'd considered playing paintball, but hadn't quite got to the age where I was going to do that yet. But it was an amazing technological experience. It really felt every bit like Star Wars. And the other thing I'll say is that at 14, I was one of the youngest people up there. It was adults up there playing a couple of games. It was really fantastic. So I obviously got excited about it. I lived about an hour away. I went back, I dragged friends, and started playing pretty regularly.
And one of the friends that you dragged is our own Jet here. And so
Indeed.
You two kind of got a chance to play together. So tell me about, how did you get the invite and how did you take to Photon?
Jason and I were doing a play together. We were doing the musical Snoopy at a repertory theater company in Arlington. And he took our pianist with him one weekend and after the show. And they came back and she would not stop talking about it. She was so excited. And Jason, of course, was talking it up. And I had seen him, I think, on 60 Minutes about it, like that summer. So I had already wanted to go. And then Jason and Brenda were like, "Oh, this is so great. It's so great." And I was like, "Oh, please, can I go? Can I go?" And they were like, "Yeah, sure." So that was in like December of 84. And so I didn't actually get to play it until January 11th, 1985. I still remember because the first ID card. And oh my God, it was amazing. It was amazing. Because I was a kid that was really in love with Star Wars. Like Star Wars totally informed my love of gadgetry and the future, and all of that is solely based in Star Wars. So to have the chance to do something that was like Star Wars was just, oh man. And it far surpassed anything that I thought it was going to be. And it was just a blast. I loved it so much.
As I recall, we did that show for 3 weekends, and we went like every Friday and Saturday night. After the show, we would leave at like 10:30 at night. It's a 40-minute drive from where we were, go and play like 2 or 3 games, and then I'd get home at about, like midnight or something like that.
Yep. Yep, that's what, and I don't even think it took the whole 40 minutes because Brenda was like pedal to the metal the whole
Well,
way.
that's true. She had that, she had like a Corvette or something, I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
She flew. Yeah, it was great.
And Andrew, I believe, played maybe the first out of all of you because the grand opening was in March 28th,
Yeah,
and then
March
you played in
28th.
April, and
April,
then
yeah.
stayed. So tell me
I
about
did.
your
And then
experience.
so I was a senior in high school, and I also was your proverbial paper boy. So remember when people read newspapers and they were delivered by guys on bikes? Well, that was me. And so if you ever did that, the way it would work is like the pre-printed stuff that wasn't actually on the spot news was actually printed the day before, and that would come, and then the regular news would come. And so every Friday there was an entertainment section in the Dallas Morning News, and I would flip that open first because, of course, that's the first thing you're going to stick in the newspaper, right? And the big front page story on that one Friday was Photon, the big picture. And I was like, wow. So I would often read the newspaper before I started working. And I read that and I was like, wow, okay, I'm doing this. It's very cool. That newspaper article. And obviously the writers had been invited to that opening, right? Or seen it sometime in April. We ended up going, I think, with some friends from high school. And then I was, it was my senior year and I was graduating in the summer. So I said, oh, let's apply for a job. What the heck? I did, and I got hired. And so I was playing there all the time that summer. In fact, that summer and several summers after that, and for quite a while. So it was, of course, like everyone says, it's amazing. It was very immersive. I wasn't as much into the science fiction Star Wars thing. I just wanted to be good and beat people. So I was very competitive about it.
And he clocked so many people. So good.
It was, and so it was, we got to see and of course it was very popular and there's new things. So all these famous people would come in and news folks would come in, and we weren't supposed to let them take pictures. So we were always stopping them at the door. And so it was very exciting. The place would be packed. I mean, I worked there and the place would be packed. We literally would have the line, the staging room going back almost to the door.
Out the door. It would go out the door.
Easily, yeah.
It was huge. But it was just constantly, now we think, of course, laser tag is often, we think of it at least as this add-on on these arcades and other types of entertainment things. But this was by itself, and it was packed. All kinds of people were coming, old, young, you name it. They were all coming.
And it was tiny too. A lot of people don't understand it. This is at the very beginning of location-based entertainment in the country, and literally it was an arena, a staging area, because the battery belts back then took up a pretty hefty amount of real estate based on the number of games they could play, and a lobby. I don't think the lobby, it's hard to remember, but I don't think the lobby was more than like 200 square feet. I mean, it was tiny. There was no party space. You could get a Coke and that was it. Literally, you just came to play Photon, and you could play, back in the start, you could play one game and then you had to get back at the end of the line. It was crazy, but it was really a zoo. The number of people that were there most of the times that we went to play.
Yeah, and it eventually expanded the lobby, but yeah, it was a tiny postage stamp lobby. No one would consider even doing anything in a lobby that small unless you're doing takeout food where you just walk in and grab a box and leave. There's nobody would do anything that small for anything like that these days.
Yeah. It was in an office park, and like in an office complex. So we used to joke because the tagline for it was that it was the ultimate game on planet Earth, and we all used to joke that it was the ultimate game on planet Earth in an office complex.
Yeah, the ultimate
So,
game in
or
an
just
office
the ultimate
complex,
game in an office complex.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was great though. God.
How early on in the process did code names kick in, and what were each of your code names?
It started with code names. That
Yeah.
was
Right from
part
the
of the
beginning.
system from the beginning.
Yeah.
And so I went by several names, and I can't remember my first names, but I switched a lot.
Yeah.
The name Digital Chicken has a story behind it, and so speaking of working there, we used to on Friday nights or some nights turn off all the lights after it closed, go out into the field with squirt guns when it was completely dark. Remember, this is like a two-story thing with ramps and all sorts of things you could run into. We were literally in the pitch black dark. There was no windows with squirt guns and shooting each other. And you know, there was an Asian guy who worked there, and he kept referring to me as a wet chicken when I was running away because I was getting wet, getting sprayed.
Yeah.
And then Bathan, you know, Bathan from the TV show, Lord Bathan, he was working there, and he said, "Oh, you're more like a digital chicken," and that stuck, and that was my name.
I never knew that. That's awesome.
Yeah. So Bathan actually helped me get my name.
That's awesome.
Still stuck.
And
Go ahead, Jet.
Well, I started playing as Jet, and then I was really good friends with my friend Barbara played as Ziggy Stardust. So then I became Jet Star for a while, and then Lord Jet. I think Bathan gave me that name. And then, but I think everybody that knows me from Photon just knows me as Jet, really.
Yeah. I don't know some certain people's real names. Actually, I meet them and I forget your real name. We would actually call each other by our names.
Yep.
And then after, of course, we separated for decades, and we run into each other at some kind of reunion. I actually forget that people's actual names. I don't know. Sometimes I don't know them. That's why I jokingly refer to it amongst Photon folks as my real
name. So I was reading Dune for the first time that I played Photon, and hadn't really, I mean, again, we think about this as no big deal now, having an avatar, having a name like this, but back when Photon opened, this was pretty original idea. We didn't necessarily create nicknames for ourselves for any discernible reason. So I kind of quickly pulled the Baron from the Baron Harkonnen out of Dune and kept on playing with that. And now I've passed it on to progeny. So my son, who only ever got to play Photon once at Mark's place, but played laser tag with me at tournaments, went by Baby Baron or Baby B, and people still know him as that. So those code names had a stickiness to them that was pretty weird. But again, back when Photon started, we weren't online. We didn't all have all these code names and things like that. So it was a really novel concept. And they had to type it in the original software. You had the cards, but they had to type in the names. The cards didn't have names on them back in the day. So every single person had to have their name typed in, and the guys that would run the card machine, they'd often make mistakes or play with it, or you got people that wanted a space or didn't want a space or things like that. So it was crazy, but it was neat the way that the scoreboard came up at the end with your code names and stuff.
Yeah.
So
you only had
speaking of
11
that,
letters to play with. So if somebody hit you with a long name, you had to like get creative.
So speaking of scoreboards, my name is actually embedded in 80s lore. So when the TV show came to town and they were filming these bumper things in the lobby, and I was working at the time, and literally I was up for like 36 hours. I didn't sleep for some absurd amount of time. And the producers wanted for the intro and background, I guess you'd call it B-reels. I'm not a TV guy. like pictures of the shots of the screen, right, with scores. So of course I got in there, and now we call these Easter eggs, but I put, Bodie Lee was the main character, so he had the top score, and we put these pods out, and so we could actually put the scores we wanted, right? So they would end up with the, Bodie Lee being having all the points. But below that was Bathan, and then we actually slipped in George Carter, and then we slipped in another marketing guy named Dan Allen. He was working and then I was on the bottom, D Chicken. So if you see that intro pop up very quickly for like second and a half or something, you'll see D Chicken in there. So I'm embedded in 80s cultural lore. And then also when Sports Illustrated reporter came by. So thing is, that's so hot that Sports Illustrated flew a reporter out to talk to us. And lo and behold, of course, he thought the name thing was interesting. So when he described it, says, you pick a name. And one of the names he put in there in the article was Digital Chicken. So I can say literally my name is in Sports Illustrated.
Wasn't that the whole wild asparagus roving herds
that's
of
where
roving?
that came from.
Oh my
Yes.
God.
There was
Okay.
some that you can, by the way, so you can Google, anyone listening to this can Google somewhere in Sports Illustrated around 1986. That's when that issue was. I believe it was February. One of the first 2 months of 1986. You can find that online at the archives of Sports Illustrated.
I think the Time Magazine article is also in archives somewhere, because I read it like 5 years ago. Again, just like was searching something and I was like, oh, Time, really? And went back and read it. It was kind of fun. It was cool to get that little blast from the past.
Well, from what I understand, a few people got a little moment in 80s history. And since you brought it up, we'll just kind of skip ahead for a moment to the TV show. Now, there was a window of time where the marketing kind of shifted demographics, and there was for kids home gear and a book series and a TV show. And from what I understand, Jet was the inspiration for the Tivia character, and some of the characters on the show were based on actual players that you played with at Photon in Dallas. So, Jet, could you tell me a little about how you found that out and what you remember of the people who were actual real-life players who then became immortalized as lizards or intergalactic warriors?
Okay, so I have ADHD and my memory's kind of bad, so I'm sure that these two guys can help fill in the blanks. But okay, so I think you did an interview with Bathan.
Yes.
I think that was your interview with Bathan. That's how I found out. Like, I have been clueless all these years, and I listened to that video and I was like, I'm sorry, wait, what? Like, that was a shocker because I had no clue. And then I think also Loretta, I think, referenced it at one point that her character was based on a player, and I was like, oh my God, it's actually true. Like, what? So that was trippy. And then Bathan obviously is based on Lord Bathan, and I can't remember. I think Bodie Lee was based on a player named Wade Duchesne who played by Daredevil. And I want to say like, huh?
Could be.
And then I want to say that I always thought he was based on Parzival, Steve, for a long time. And then I was like, oh, okay, wait. And then I want to say the little kid based on Gremlin or Atari?
I don't know.
And then, I forgot who the lizard guy was based on.
So early on, could be. Early on,
the one named Recon?
They actually, Recon.
Oh,
yeah,
my
Recon
God.
He was big. He was, not fat or something, but he was this larger guy, had a large frame.
He was just a big guy, burly.
Husky guy. And that's how you knew him. He's this husky guy, fun guy, right? And so he was, I forgot which character, but one of those characters, yeah.
Yeah. And he was really blunt. Like Recon was like, they
blunt.
brought that bluntness into the show with it because he didn't mince words. He told you what he was thinking.
Yeah.
So what were the traits that they took from real people that then you saw translated in, at whatever degree did you see it on the screen?
Well, Bathan looks like Bathan from back then for sure. So when they first did this, they actually had drawings, and they're almost like animation style single color drawings that they gave to the corporate office, and they ended up being Xerox. Remember Xeroxing stuff?
Mhm.
And we passed these around, and they were prototypes of these characters, and some of them didn't make it in, and some of them were radically changed. Like one of the characters, which might have been Bodhi Lee or the kid, originally had like this sort of weird prosthetic arm thing with the gun over the head.
Oh
And,
yeah.
and that I think that was a reference to somebody like Parsifal sliding down one of the railings. There
Mhm.
was a railing that was a wood railing with a PVC pipe on. He figured out how to slide down it while he was shooting and would put his gun up. They're supposed to pay
Yeah.
that. And I think that's where that idea came from, because they were watching us and they were like, came to get these. And
Yeah.
supposedly someone told me that there was some big, large, fat thing, and this round thing. And someone said, that must be the digital chicken. That must be the digital chicken. I didn't think so. But whatever it was, didn't make it in there. But I never thought that was what that was. But a few other people thought it was. But Bathan, that was what Bathan looked like. I mean, he had long black hair, straight black hair, and the mustache.
That's
Yeah.
70s mustache. He
Yeah,
just
with the
rocked
chin,
it.
yeah, the chin, well, that was, he looked like that. They captured him very
Yeah.
well.
They nailed it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I don't okay, so I'm neurodivergent and I was not very good at masking my opinions. And I did not suffer fools well at all. Like I just really didn't handle it well when people didn't bother to use their brains. And I think so I from what I remember of watching the show when I saw it was that Tivia was very short-tempered and man-hating, which I don't think that I was, but I didn't, I've always spoken my mind, and my dad didn't teach me to be a girl. He taught me to just, if you think it, you say it. And so I didn't defer, let's just put it that way. And so I don't think I was a man hater, but I don't know, the guys would probably tell you, oh no, she was. So, but yeah, I guess the bad temper, that's fair enough.
That sounds pretty accurate.
Thanks, Jason.
And I'll just say from the player's perspective, most of the Photon franchise and players that weren't in Dallas, they may have seen the TV show before, or maybe they were 14th, or I don't know what ages, seeing it. And that's maybe one part of how they learned about it or identified with it. But the Dallas people just didn't, because we were there before all that, right? And there was a lot of, it was mixed feelings about that. Yeah, it was cool to have Bathan be a character, but there was a lot of definitely a significant amount of negativity. But we just didn't care, right? We're playing our games. We don't care about the TV show. It's not really part of what we do.
Right.
So that's a different experience than people that say we read all the different franchises. They might have had a different experience with that.
I don't.
Well, I'm just going to say that from my vantage point, because I was significantly younger at that point in time, I was one of those kids watching the show, and that was my first exposure to laser tag, was watching that. And also because there was really only the one girl character, I looked at the Tivia character and at 6 years old probably didn't use the phrase badass, but if that's what you inspired, that reached somebody, and then that brought me to the world of laser tag, which I might not have found if not for that. So perhaps you're right that some people might have come across Photon and been able to play where they were, because you never know what's going to reach somebody. But I can certainly understand you all were already there and you were already about the game itself. So let's go kind of back to the Dallas experience, and what was it that really was the experience for you what was the game like, and what stood out to you as being like the thing that made the biggest impression when you were playing?
Jason?
It was the wholeness of the experience. It was again the first immersive experience. I guess the only other comparable thing I can think of growing up would have been going to a really high quality haunted house, and there were a couple around the Dallas area. Because it was such a complete experience. I guess the other thing that's so different from what laser tag became is we all treated it as an athletic event. It was an athletic contest first, and a
Yeah.
game second. And nowadays, I think you'd almost definitely flip that. I mean, remember, we were running that was allowed and encouraged, and there were people that could fly through that arena. I'm amazed more of us didn't get more injured, but we were in better control of our bodies back then. But
We were sweating.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, yeah. You played 2 games in a row, and you were just came out dripping. So we really thought of it as a sporting event back then. That's legitimately how we saw it, and less as a game. And it wasn't until, to a degree, it wasn't until the TV show came out that people started before that, it was mostly an adult crowd when I went to Dallas,
Yep.
and even Oklahoma City, San Antonio, the other places where I played. After the TV show came out, because it was a cartoon, it became associated as, this is something you take your kid to. So that's when we started doing birthday parties and stuff like that. I had my graduation party at Photon, and it was just a private rental. You rented it. I think it was like an hour, and you got to play as many games as you could. And that's what I did for my graduation. That was a party back then. There was no pizza or, birthday cake or tablecloths or anything like that. You just went in and played Photon, which is what I wanted to do for my graduation.
So parties would be corporate parties, and they would be,
Yeah.
because it was cost a lot of money. And then if you've seen the movie, if anyone's seen that wrestling movie about the Von Erichs from the Dallas area would rent Photon. I didn't know anything about wrestling, but clearly I met a bunch of them because I worked there at those parties. And so, and then actors and actresses and famous people would come in. I played Photon with Stuart Copeland, the Police. He was a polo guy. He did polo, and he was in Dallas for a polo thing. And so I joke, I played with Stuart Copeland. We're tight. And
I have a different Stuart Copeland story.
And Walter Koenig from Star Trek came in. It was at a convention. It's like Jason, and he came by. And so there were a couple famous folks who came by, and I'm sure more, and when thinking Fountain Valley near LA came, but the novelty of it had all these folks coming by. When Michael Jackson came, did this big show at Texas Stadium, now demolished. Supposedly the management called, this is the rumor at least, if he worked there, that he called and that he wanted to come because, he's obviously this kid, right? He was always this kid attitude. And supposedly what happened was that his manager would not let him come because the risk of him being the product, right? So that didn't happen.
But
so that was part of it. And the experience of playing for me was very competitive. I got on a team called Paradox, which was the first, I guess the way to say it is factory team. This team from Denver sent a letter to Dallas and saying, we challenge you. And then the management decided whoever wins the league that summer gets to go fly over there, and you have a set of challenge matches with Denver, the Denver team. We won that, but it was very, very competitive. I mean, I did some things in high school and sports as a kid. This was very, very competitive. People were very competitive.
Serious rivalry, yeah.
And I joined a team which was really the misfits at the time. So the best team was not us, but we got these sort of
it quickly became that.
So it did become that. In the second tier, we were the second tier, and kind of the attitude was very sports-like. We're gonna use our strengths and weaknesses and figure out what those are and strategize and practice. Have regular practices. You have to show up for practice. You don't show up for practice, you're not playing. That very disciplined kind of attitude. And then we came to that league to play that better team, which was called the Octagon. And we basically wiped them out. And for a while, that Team Paradox was the best team in Photon for a long time. And of course, we went to Denver, and we won that. So to me, it was very competitive, and that was a great part. It was like, no one can take away from me that I was on probably the first best laser tag team in the world.
Yeah.
Right.
And that was
no one can take that away from me. I can get hit by a car tomorrow, and that's still part of my history, is all this stuff, right?
That was a huge rivalry too, because all of the regulars were fully divided. Team Paradox, Team Octagon. And we, like so many of us, really wanted to see Octagon get knocked down because they were like, I guess if you look at a top tiered sports team, they're the league champions or whatever, they're all going to be like, oh, we're so great, we're awesome, you know, nothing can touch us kind of thing. And we, so many of us just wanted to get a dose of reality that we were not reality. I don't mean it like that, but I mean, we just wanted them to know what it was like to get spanked, because they had been spanking all of us for so long. And man, Paradox did that. And it was awesome. I'm not going to
And
lie.
there was some word of mouth about the thing outside of Dallas. So I was in the parking lot one time, and it was probably 87 or something. And 86, and somebody said, oh, you know, ran into somebody in the parking lot, this stranger, and they were socializing outside the door too in the parking lot.
Mhm.
And he said, who are you? On Digital Chicken. Oh, Digital Chicken. You were in that set of games where you played Octagon. All this stuff. This guy just started telling me this. He's from Oklahoma, right? Well, how did you know any of this, right? How did you know my name? I was shocked. I mean, I couldn't, that was like, that blew my mind. That this guy knew this. So someone obviously told him this. They heard about it. And then that means there must have been something by word of mouth going around.
I'm sure. That was such a huge rivalry.
Yeah, that was a big deal. Everybody knew about that.
Yeah.
So that was my experience with playing, was being very competitive. Wanted to be good, wanted to win.
Yeah. It was. We all took it really seriously. It was definitely a sport, not a game. And then, like, my perspective being a girl, like, there was the women that played that game also, not only were we competing with the men, but we were also competing with each other. So you paid attention to who had the high score and what woman did you need to beat next. And you know, because I'm very competitive also. So my goal, I wanted to beat the great guys. I wanted to beat Digital Chicken and Parsival and Shadow. I wanted to beat Lord Bathan. Didn't have any hope in hell that it was ever going to happen, but I really wanted to beat Lord Bathan. And I mean, we took that seriously. So looking back now, I mean, I guess maybe it's kind of, I got a little too serious about it, but it was fun. It was such a great thing. You were friends with everybody, even though you had people that you wanted to beat and were really competitive against. They were your friends. We were like a big family. And I will never be as close in my life, have not been as close, and will never be as close in my life to anyone than the people that I was friends with at that time in that place.
And I think it's worth pointing that out, is like, over the years, you know, now we're so used to social media and all these things. Back when it was, you know, the crazy dial-up sounds of AOL and modems, you know, we had email lists, we've been, a lot of these people have been friends all these years.
Yeah.
And that was, so there was this bond part of that thing, is that we were this first thing, and we had all these different weird experiences with doing that. And so even people, like, they might be on different views of politics and other things about life, but we still are, you know, when it comes to Photon, are laughing, making jokes, and they're together, right? So that's another thing to take away, is like, my spouse does not necessarily understand the depth of which this is true. But you know, they're people who, I mean, when someone's passed away, we've all together, wherever we were in the world, you know, basically grieved about it.
Yeah.
So
These
that shows
people
you how the bond is. They were really true friends. Right?
These people are my family. These guys are my brothers, and I love them as much as I could possibly. Sorry guys, but I love these people, and they are my family. And a lot of them know me better than anybody in my entire life ever has or will, better than my own family does. And we're a big family. We're not friends. We're all just a big family.
It was something as simple as having to wait in line to be able to play, that helped you meet other people. That doesn't happen anymore, because you get a ticket that says come back at 10:10 and go play our video games and spend some money there or whatever, so that you actually, I mean, because you might wait to play a game on a busy weekend night. You might wait an hour to play a 6.5-minute game. I remember, Jet, the first time I think we dragged you along, that Random was in the group up ahead of us. And we sat and talked with him all night long, this kind of lanky sort of David Bowie sort of character, just one of the I mean, very good player, but one of the nicest guys you'd ever meet. And he was so friendly and so happy to chat with us and get what was then. I mean, I played maybe 4 or 5 times, and she hadn't played at all and stuff like that. But he was, he's friendly to us and talked us through things. So it was a neat bunch. I went off to college pretty quickly after, unfortunately, and so I went to Oklahoma. I played at Oklahoma City for a while, and went down to San Antonio and played there when they reopened, and made a lot of friends there. But it was a pretty good group of folks that hung out there, and you didn't feel I don't know, you felt kind of welcomed in once you got over a certain level of I'm not a total noob at this. I still remember going, and the big football dude that bullied me in high school, because I was 2 years ahead, so I was fairly small in high school. He came in to play Photon, and one of the best experiences of my life was just totally following him around the entire game and laying waste to this guy. The only thing that comes close is when I've gone back to play as an old man, and people act like, oh gee, oh no, he's on our team or something like that. But it was that was a good night when he came in. I don't even remember the dude's name, but I remember the way he looked, and he was a football player, and he came into play, and I was like, oh, I need to go on the other team for this one.
There was a certain cred being involved with this in the Dallas area. Like, so I have this Photon t-shirt, which I made. You can just get things on the internet and make it. And I got the blessing of the guy who owns the trademark to make this. And I wore this the first time about 4 or 5 months ago. I forgot when it was. In public, I went to lunch, then I went to some event at a restaurant afterwards. Three people stopped me, talked about Photon. I'm like,
yep.
It was amazing to me. And so one guy was a parent, and he said, he was talking to his boy. He said, see, it's really true what I told you. And he saw the shirt.
Oh man.
And I'm like, that's like amazing. And then when I was working there, and of course it was still the time of shopping malls, I would have been in a shopping mall for some reason, going clothes shopping or whatever it might be. And I would actually get stopped by people. Don't you work at Photon? So I was stopped several times by people having been an employee there. So it had some sort of cred. And it was kind of weird. And of course, friends I grew up with didn't believe this. And one time I was at a restaurant, I think it was even after Photon had closed, with this guy I knew and went to high school with him. And somebody came up and started talking about Photon with me. And then after he left, he said, my friend said, so you weren't lying. That was really true. People will bother you about it. So it was some interesting thing in Dallas where you had some cred being involved in it. Very interesting experience.
I have a Photon sweatshirt, and every time I wear it, somebody says, oh, Photon, high five, kind of thing. The best one was, I work in television, and so I'm in LA, and I'm in my TV job, and one of the editors goes walking by, and I'm in my Photon sweatshirt, and he's like, oh my God, Photon, which one? And he had played it when he was a little kid, and I thought he was going to cry right there. And it was just awesome. It's great you meet a total stranger, and you fully have a connection to that person because you went through this experience and they did too. And it's weird, the people that it touches in the way that it touches them. And if you played it more than, if you did more than just come in and play it once and go, oh, it was all right. If you actually really played Photon, you know exactly what I'm saying, because we all have that fondness and that connection through it. And I don't have that connection, not for any of the other things that I've done, shows that I've worked on or plays that I've done or anything. It's just not the same.
You're describing very well, I think, the reason that this resonates still so many years later. And, there may not be Photon, but it certainly gave birth to all the laser tag that followed and the communities that evolved from that. But Photon, definitely, there was something very special. And I could tell from the moment that I walked into the 30th anniversary that Jason had a hand in putting together when 10 years ago there was a Photon event. As an outsider who wasn't there with you all at that time, I just felt like I had just walked into a family reunion. So 30 years was marked with a special celebration. And Jason, I wonder if you could just kind of talk to that event and what at that point went into bringing it back so that people could experience it all over again and have that reminiscing.
Well, Mark Mueller had reopened a couple of times in the Baltimore, Maryland area and Laurel, Maryland. And he was using Photon gear to play with, and it was becoming apparent that the technology, well, those of us that played it still loved it. It hadn't aged well compared to other laser tag, and so he made the decision to switch his facility to Lasertron gear instead. Kept the arena, switched the equipment, and there were people there that had a same level of love and affection for the equipment as we do, and so they were trying to take care of it. But the reality is with the electronics that if you don't use the batteries, they die, and they don't. You need to really condition them and keep them going. And so we had tried for Armageddon, which is a laser tag tournament that I'm sure you and all your listeners know about because you've had some of those folks on. We had tried to play Photon one of the last years that I ran the Armageddon tournament, and we couldn't get a game together. You couldn't play a full game, and everybody was really disappointed. And so Mark and I lived reasonably close by in Pennsylvania at the time. Mark and I were trying to figure out what we could do, and we realized that you could get you could redo the battery belt with a more modern battery, but there was some cost involved, and we knew there was a community out there that would want to play Photon again. So we put up Kickstarter. Was fairly early back then, so we put up a Kickstarter and tried to put an event together. And we wanted to make it more than, because some people that were coming weren't going to want to play a lot because they were physically unable to. So we didn't want to make it just a Photon tournament. We wanted to add some more things to it, and that's where we dug up Mandar, and we got George out to come to the first one, and planned a big banquet and some of the other things associated with Photon, where you kind of discovered it, to give people some other stuff to do over the weekend, because we were unfortunately no longer at the age where playing for 3 or 4 hours straight was a practical thing. It was beautiful. We raised enough money to have a couple of the guys that were engineers redo the battery belts so that we could continue playing with the equipment. They made the equipment pristine. It was as much fun playing then as it was the first couple of times, because there was so much, all of the emotion that you're hearing us talk about. Those guys that were techs, and most of them weren't employees. They were just guys that became electronic engineers that wanted to play Photon again. They spent hours cleaning up the equipment, making sure we had enough, figuring out the battery problems so that we could play once again. We had to make a giant Faraday cage because of all the interference to be able to play with the radio. So Mark's entire arena was a giant Faraday cage to keep out other signals that would interfere, because so much had grown in the spectrum that Photon used for the radio from back when Dallas started and the franchises were. So that was the idea of Photon. I really planned the first year with Mark, and then moved on to other things. And I know he had several more, and I only made it back briefly to one of them. I wish I'd have gone back more, because of course his location is closed down and all that. But I was typically busy when he had them planned. But it was a neat event. It was fun to have the folks from from the TV show out. It was fun to have George come out and reminisce. We tried to get some other people out. I don't know if either you two know or remember, but apparently Mark Cuban used to live in those apartments right across the street from
Oh my God.
Photon's corporate headquarters. And he apparently played Photon a lot as a kid.
I didn't know
Um,
that.
and a young
He was
college student.
probably
We
there.
actually invited him. He sent me
Oh
a
my
very
God.
nice email back saying, there's no way I can make it, but thank you very much. Brings back fond memories. But Cuban used to play at the Dallas Photon because he lived right across the street.
Would he come on perpetual past days?
I
Oh
maybe
my God. No, he was a perpetual past player. Oh my
he
God, that's
he
hilarious.
sounds like the sort of personality that would have figured out the best possible deal and come for
Yep.
that.
Oh my God,
Um,
I'm dying.
I'd love to know what he played by because we might remember him. He knew what his name was.
The email he sent me was a final email, or I would have loved to have tried to get some of that information. But he was at least cordial about it. But there were a lot of people that, that played some. So it was interesting times. But that was the story of Photon. Prior to that, the T-shirt that I'm wearing was Mark had a Photon reunion tournament the year that he reopened XP Laser Sport. It had started and it was a giant partnership of 400 people or something like that, too many chefs. And so it was very difficult to operate. And then he reopened it with a smaller group and had the reunion tournament. And so I actually got together 4 or 5 of the guys that I used to play with in San Antonio. And we had the Oklahoma City guys came up, several of the Dallas players, all the Baltimore and Delaware and Virginia Beach, some of those players came up, and we had we had to have a draft tournament because no one had enough players from any one place to do stuff. But then we did a bunch of grudge games from the locations where we played with, and it was fun.
Got to have those grudge matches.
I'd be curious
We're
to
all-
know, did any of you continue to play any form of laser tag after Photon was done?
I tried, but it wasn't the same. And
Yeah.
also, I mean, to be honest, life was there, and that's when I got involved with getting a degree in song. But I never. Now I do it with my kid. Well, my kid's older, and doesn't want to play laser tag because it's older. But when she was young and she'd go to these parties, um, she heard this story, so she's like, "You're gonna play on our team." And depending on which system it was, sometimes I did well, even though I'd never had not stepped into anything like that before in a long time. But I never did it regularly in any way. And I think by the time it got really common, I was a much older person.
Yeah.
So if there was a substitute maybe earlier on, I might have played more. But
Mhm.
by the time it became so common, I was a much older at that time, in the middle of careers and things like that.
Yeah. Like I got invited with some friends to play laser tag, but it was like it was in a big room, like maybe a 30 by 30 foot room. And all you basically could do, like you couldn't run, you couldn't get within so many feet of other people. There were too many people in the room. So basically you just stood in one place and just fired your phaser at people. And I was like, this is like the lamest freaking thing ever. I don't know what this is, but I wouldn't even call it a game. And I just never went back. And I haven't tried it since. So
I think we all know that I went on to play a lot of laser tag afterwards, and worked for a different laser tag manufacturer and owned my own mobile tactical business. I will agree, by and large, only one other experience ever came even close, and that was some of the really nice indoor tactical places that had a game that was similar. The first two big laser tags that came out after Photon were Laser Runner and Qzar. And Qzar got bigger than Photon actually, but the gameplay in Qzar to me was and still is ridiculous. It's funny to go and play it at a tournament with people that know what they're doing, but essentially where the Photon put the LED. The Photon was reverse IR, which means that the gun's received rather than fired. QSAR flipped that process, and then in Photon, we put the sensor in the gun was way down at the end of essentially a straw, a piece of plastic, and that reduced the coning effect of light, because anytime you do anything with light, it's going to cone out. QSAR put their sensor right at the front of the gun with no shielding whatsoever. So firing your QSAR gun was like throwing a grenade. And I remember someone that used to play a lot of Photon. I can't remember who it was. We were talking on Alt Sport Photon and Alt Sport Laser Tag, which was a precursor to chat rooms and message boards and things like that. And he was like, "Oh, I think QSAR's way more accurate than Photon ever was." I'm like, "No, it's not. It's just a giant wide explosion of a beam. So all you have to do is kind of look in the general direction of someone and you tag them. That is not the same thing as being accurate." But and then Laser Runner was similarly not very it was made very inexpensively, and it showed. It wasn't a fun game to play, and it wasn't until quite a few years down the line that some of the systems, I mean, a lot of these systems weren't even radio. In QSAR, you had to go and download at the end of the game. It wasn't even as sophisticated as Photon was 8 or 10 years after Photon started. It was amazing to me.
And I will say that's one thing about Photon is that it's probably just sheer luck, because, George Carter, for all his thoughts about putting into it, he's not a game designer. He doesn't know the game design and the rules. I mean, wasn't his level of expertise. But he got very lucky when they came up with these concepts, like shooting folks. So when you first played Photon, by the way, if anyone has played Photon listening to this, you can't phase someone 3 times. You can't zap them 3 times. You got to zap some other target. That was not in the original software. Original software, you could keep going on someone all day.
Oh my God!
Realized the gameplay was not very good, and so the software writers changed that, and then got uploaded into the pods. But so some of those rules, having the base, shooting the base 3 times, losing points for shooting, these different combinations, all those combinations of rules are actually made for a strategic game, right? And I don't think that any of these with game designers thinking heavily about that. There's a lot of luck involved with them getting a game that ended up being interesting, and allowed there to be strategy and things you put into a sport, different types of plays and things you put into a sport. So it's kind of luck. And the first ones I played after Photon, I think, is what Jason's saying, is they just didn't have the gameplay. There wasn't this intricate aspect. And that's probably one reason I didn't continue to play them at that time.
There's some interesting games out there now that I find fun to play, or did maybe 4 or 5 years ago when I was playing a little more regularly. But I still, and we've had this discussion a lot, those that have played a bunch, Photon still did have the best game design, the rate of fire, the tag 3 things, then you got to tag something else, the way the bases worked. It was a lot better game design than what came after it for a long time. And now there's some things that maybe kind of come close, but the market's gone to, fire as fast as you want, and honestly, most public places, even if their software can accommodate what would be an honest team game, a lot of places don't even play it. They just play everybody go in the arena and tag each other, or, we're going to turn off the bases and all these other things. Players' tolerance of complexity has dropped precipitously, so that people don't want to understand how to play a more complex game like Photon was, except for the absolute regulars. And those are small populations of people at most laser tag facilities. So it's really unfortunate, because Photon was just a better game. in the way it was played, technology aside. Some of the reasons, like the fire rate, I'm assuming probably was a technical hurdle that they couldn't allow you to fire much faster. But that ended up being, that 1 point whatever second between firing and getting that rhythm down ended up making it a better game than if I'd have been able to pull the trigger, and every time I pulled the trigger, I was tagging something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there were some technical things in the very first versions of the software. So later on, they changed the software to where it would pull all the pods that get scoring. And so then it became equal. But in the very beginning, the first round of software, which is another thing they had to change, was if you shot somebody, then it would try to go and talk to the main computer and upload your score. So that meant if you could keep shooting somebody, you could keep getting your score uploaded. And then that apparently, when people were out on the field all playing, that created a bias. You could actually be racking up more score than someone else because you were essentially hogging the cycles. And these weren't super fast systems at the time. So, and I think, by the way, that was one of Bathan's tricks and early on, was that he would
flood the system.
Oh yeah, he would like bang, 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 bang. And then he was and they figured this out, right? And so he was able to just essentially hog the bandwidth, is what we would say now.
Well, remember the dead zones at Starbase?
Oh yeah. Oh God.
You could go in one little corner in where those trees were, and the radio couldn't pick you up when you got tagged. And so you could stay there the whole game and never go down. And once you walked out, you'd take, 40 hits or whatever. It was crazy.
Yeah.
You worked at Starbase, didn't you,
Very
Jet?
cool memories of that.
Yes, sadly, yes. It was a very different place, and working there was very different. And I didn't last much longer after Starbase. I just didn't enjoy it there at all. So yeah.
The problem with Starbase is they really focused on the phaser stations, which were another Photon invention that didn't get recreated until many, many years later, where players that weren't in the game could, put in $1 and they had a phaser in a stationary spot and they could essentially play a live video game. Well, at Starbase, so many people were reluctant to play the actual game and wanted to play phaser stations. I remember going up there one time and whoever was managed was like, you can just keep playing for free, because otherwise we won't have players on the field for the people that are putting in the dollars on the clink stations to be able to play with anybody. So you could I went up there and played like a whole afternoon because they wanted things to shoot on the field.
Yeah.
The whole thing. I mean, there was like 30 of those stations
surrounding
the field. It was insane. And they would be packed because this was like a high-end tourist mall in Dallas.
Yeah. Well, and you had to change. You had to play with a different style of play because, like, the field was fairly wide open because they wanted everyone to be visible to the clink stations.
Right.
So, it was just kind of So Photon was a game where you could play it with some strategy and some stealth. And sneaking was a part of that game. Stealth was a part of that game. But then you get to Starbase, and it's basically kill or be killed. It's Thunderdome.
Yeah, it is.
I did not really enjoy it. So, and nobody was playing. They all wanted to play the stations. And so, I would just feed people through constantly. I would tell them, don't even unplug. Like, I think by the time Starbase came around, you didn't have to unplug anymore between games. Or maybe I would just unplug them and plug them directly in. And that's just what I would stand there doing, is plugging and unplugging people, and then please get right back in line. And it just wasn't, the experience was not the same at all.
What's interesting about Photon too were the different locations developed totally different styles of play that were terribly effective. So I went to college in San Antonio and played there for a year. And because when Dallas was built, a lot of the obstacles, it was not a full 2-story building. You wouldn't legally be able to build the Dallas Photon Arena today with all the different building code rules. But back then, the second floor was fairly short. So even even someone my size at 5'8" could get up on our tippy toes and block my sensors to fire. Well, San Antonio was built in an entirely different way. The second floor was just ever so much higher, so it changed completely all the angles, all the ways you had to hide your sensors to play, all of that. And then I remember the guys from I think it was Phoenix came to a tournament in Oklahoma City, and their field was even taller. So they almost all of them, all they did was dogfighting. They very rarely used the arena itself to block sensors. And then you had the version 1 guns and the version 3 guns, which made a massive difference in how you could tag someone. It made it very interesting.
Yeah.
We went up. I remember. So I remember Dallas players. Dallas used to love to come down to San Antonio because it was close, and because we had one of the few 2-field arenas. So we had an alpha field and an omega field, which was a similar symmetrical design, but completely different. And then if we really wanted to be cool, and I don't know why they didn't make it easier, it took like 20 minutes, but we could remove the plywood pieces between the fields, and you could actually play a large game, both fields at the same time, and fire over the observation deck and everything else. And so Dallas players loved to truck down and play us. And we were very competitive with Dallas players at our own home field. We were not competitive with them anywhere else because you got used to a very specific style of playing, and some people, couldn't crack out of it at all.
Yeah, like I played in Canada at Toronto, and then I also went and played in Houston. And Toronto was a completely different field, and we got our clocks cleaned. I mean, they were, and from what I understand, it wasn't even their best players there that day. And they just, I mean, they clocked us. They had 2 really good guys that were really top tier at their location, but then the rest of their team was just regular people. And I mean, we just got our clocks cleaned. And then I went down to Houston. And I didn't tell anybody I was from Dallas because I knew I'd have a big target on my back if I did, because the cities were really competitive with each other.
Yeah.
So I didn't say anything about who I was. I didn't even play under my name. Like I totally had a different name and everything, signed up for my ID card with a different name, the whole 9 yards. And their field was like I think if I remember correctly, it was either like an alpha or it was very similar to an alpha, but it was smaller and more compact. So like I got a contusion on my arm because I was dodging between structures, and the opening was not as wide as it was on the Dallas field. And I hurt myself. But I mean, I cleaned up down there. I mean, I'm like mopped the field up, and it with very little effort. And when I got out, Barbara was managing at the time, and she was really mad because she was like, how am I going to build trust with these guys when you're coming in and mopping up the floor with them? And I'm like, what did you want me to do? Walk around and let people hit me? But it was really interesting how different the fields were, what the different philosophies were and style of play. Because I played like I would have played in Dallas, and these guys were not playing that way at all. They didn't use the furniture the way we used it in Dallas. And so it was
fun to go to other places and not identify yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And just go and sign up like a customer. And then there was these guys with great bravado who had been playing 3 weeks, and just go in there and not say anything, and then frankly clean up on them. And it was, oh, what's going on here? Something's wrong, and you had to tell them, well, I'm from Dallas. And there'd be a little, they'd either laugh or they'd get mad. But it was always fun to do that. I did that in several locations, Chicago and San Antonio and Houston, and it was Oklahoma City, and it was a blast doing that. Basically being the experienced people and going there when they first opened, and you could, basically have fun with it.
When you played in Houston, did you notice that they played differently? Like they didn't use the playing field, they didn't use the plan the way we did. They didn't use the furniture.
I don't know that I can remember that much. I know
Okay.
that, like, we had much, there's certain rules. You can't cover yours.
Right.
And we were a lot more strict about that stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's, of course, partly because the thing had been open long enough, and we tried to stop people from doing all those tricks that were potentially unfair, right? And so I think at some of those places, when I first went to some of them, people had either rediscovered those tricks that we had made illegal, or they figured out new tricks to make something unfair, figure out somehow to get the body part over sensor in some way. So that was what I remembered. And we would
Yeah.
go to the game commanders and say, hey, what's going on? They're like, well, we don't care. We don't know.
Great.
And so that was a difference it was also the interpretation of the rules
True.
was different.
And I had that problem because I used to play holding on to my left cable because the helmet would slip over and cover my eyes. It was too big and it would cover my eyes. And so we all had these foam pads that we would put inside our helmets in Dallas so that they would keep the visor from falling into your face. And when I got down to Houston, they wouldn't let me have that in my visor at all. So I can't see. So I'm holding on to the cable like I would in Dallas. But I mean, I'm really cranking on that thing just to keep the visor from falling all the way down to here, just to keep it like right here. And the game commander kept yelling at me to let go of my equipment and stop he thought I was trying to hide my chest pod, the IR on my chest pod. And I'm like, no, man, I just can't see. So yeah, that was but I mean, he was really strict about that. No touching the equipment. You can't. And I just was like, dude. So they were pretty phobic about that at the Houston location. Don't touch your equipment.
Tulsa didn't allow running.
Yeah.
I went there on opening night and like almost got thrown out. I'm like, what are you talking about? Of course we can run. Nope, we don't allow that here.
I got yelled at for that too. Yeah. I got yelled at for that about 30 seconds before I clocked my arm on a piece of furniture and had to go to the ER.
Nice.
Well, with all these stories, I'd just love to know, do each of you have maybe one favorite memory of those early days of Photon that you could share?
One favorite movie.
Go ahead. I've thought of a couple of things, but
you go ahead because I'm thinking.
Okay. For Dallas Photon, the best thing that ever happened to me was I went off to college for 2 years in Oklahoma and played regularly at Oklahoma City, which became a fairly decent center. And then Dallas still was doing leagues, but they had dropped down to doing a draft league. And so I signed up for it because I was spending the summer back in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And nobody knew who I was, so I got picked last. And I certainly wasn't the best player on the team. A lot of the regular guys, like the Paradox players and stuff, I mean, they still played some, but they weren't playing leagues. So it was kind of a next generation. Pathfinder, I think, played that league, and some other folks. And because I got picked last and should have probably been picked like second, I mean, we absolutely dominated. So that was my best Dallas memory. Well, I take that back. The best memory was coming back from Oklahoma City for the 2 weeks that the visual light phasers worked. That was the back in the day, actual lasers were exceedingly expensive and fragile to put into something that we're going to bang around and play laser tag with. And so what was it, like a xenon tube or something like that? It was some other. Yeah. And it just, if you pump the arena full of fog, it did something to the game that lasers and current laser tag don't do. You can see them and they're all right, but they look teeny tiny and it's not meaningful. It's not that. The light phasers at Photon looked like the laser blast from Star Wars. And I remember we had played in Oklahoma City and should have won and placed and got beat by their team of scrubs at the very last minute, and we're all demoralized. But we were driving back to San Antonio, so Dallas is right on the road. So we decided to stop in, and that was the weekend that they were playtesting with the light phasers. And so we got to play with them in pretty pristine condition. And I remember just standing there. I wasn't even playing. I was just standing there watching the light phasers zing back and forth because it was so cool. Because up until that time, we had nothing. You had a little yellow flashy light inside the phaser that told you someone was firing at you, and that's it. It was insanely cool experience. And I got just absolutely nuked because I was just standing there watching it the whole game. It was so cool.
I think my I have several. Besides, I mean, the general thing of having these people that you know, and they're great, a lot of them are such great people, and building those memories. That's not that one thing, that's the whole thing put together. But I think one of it playing was, when we got to go to Denver, right? So as I mentioned, we had that league and we won the league and we got to go to Denver. And it was a completely different field. We've never played on it before. And we stepped on that field. In the first game we played, we were actually losing the game. And of course, like Jason's mentioned, the field physical configurations are slightly different and wasn't working right. And the captain of our team is named Mike Roundy, who's, by the way, passed away. Great person, sadly has passed away. He runs over to me in the middle of the game. Keep in mind, they're 6 minutes long, right? So we don't have a lot of time to catch up. And he comes to me and goes, "We're losing." And somehow a bunch of communication went back and forth as we're running around, and then we ended up winning the game, right? And the guys from Denver told us that never happens. No one ever does that. That never happens. If you're winning, you end up winning the game, and that's it. We actually caught up. And there was a lot of crazy antics that went on outside of Photon with that whole experience, but it was fun to be involved with that and having that experience to go in there and on the fly, figure out how to make up for it and then winning the whole thing. And presumably there was a bet between management and Dallas and Denver involved in who knows what. And our side won, but that was a great experience.
Yeah. I'm going to say the things that we did, like after hours, like the lights out and the assassination game that we played, those are really near and dear to me. But oh man, but I'm going to say the one real on the field experience was I got drafted to play in a tournament. And like, I did not sign up for this, but they needed, I think it was 25 players and they only had 24. So Parsival bounces up to me and is like, "I need you, you're playing." And I was like, "I'm sorry, what?" And he paid my entrance fee and shoves me into this tournament with all these people from other photons. And I'm like going, "Oh my God, what the heck am I going to do? I'm going to get clobbered." And we had a guy named Jeff Ellis. I think he played by Llama. And he would always make a
roundabout. Yeah.
Yeah. And he would make a beeline for this place that we called the pillbox that was right in front of the bunker. And it was this one little room. And whoever got there first that was their room. And you could tuck your head up inside of it and lean against the wall and just shoot out of it and snipe out of it. So I was like, the one chance in heck that I have of surviving this is to be the first one into the pillbox. So I think I survived like 4 or 5 games, and that's just what I did. Like when I advanced out of the first round, I was like, "You have to be kidding me." And several people were pretty angry because they were like, "How is Jeanette?" And I was like, "Pillbox, baby." But then finally somebody who was angry that I was advancing beat me into the pillbox and I was out that game. But it was that was pretty funny like I skidded in there on my knees just to get in there in time, and it was hilarious. So.
Well, you guys have got some awesome stories, and I appreciate so much you sharing your memories of all of this that you experienced 40 years ago. Does it feel like that?
No.
No.
It does when you think of the people that you've lost, but it was yesterday.
I think you really described and painted a very nice picture of what that Photon experience was like and why it was so special to so many people. So I appreciate that you have taken us on a trip back through time to 1984, 40 years ago when Photon began and the laser tag industry was in its infancy. And now we're so appreciative to everything that happened back then for giving us everything that came forward. So thank you all for joining me and reminiscing a bit. Those are my guests. Andrew Laska, Jet Clark, and Jason Bock, original Photon players for whom 40 years later, the light still shines. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for checking out this episode of Laser Unfocused Tag Talk. Listen for more episodes on the first and third Friday of each month. Want to be a guest on an upcoming episode? Find out more and follow my blog and website at TiviaChickLovesLaserTag.com.